Okami released on April 20th, 2006, and received many ports and an HD re-release over the coming years. Published by Capcom and developed by in-house Clover Studio, this action-adventure game follows you playing the Japanese sun god Amaterasu, or Amy, in the form of a brilliant white and fiery wolf fighting against demons and monsters. Okami itself means great god or wolf, making it a very fitting title. Released on September 30th, 2010, it's the only currently available sequel on Nintendo DS named Okamiden, where you play as Amaterasu's child. I say only, as on December 12, 2024 at the Game Awards, a sequel to the original was teased. No new information has been released about the sequel as of the making of this video. My experience with the game was around in the mid-2010s. I bought it on Steam and played to what I thought was the ending. Years later, around 2021, I bought it on the Switch and played all the way to where I last was. And apparently I only made it to the halfway mark, and I accidentally skipped crucial information alluding to the rest of the plot. I currently own Okamiden, and I have played a good bit, but today's essay will be entirely focused on the original. Sorry, Chibi-Terasu. Yes, that's his actual name, he is a baby. When I sat down to start an analysis, I was at a loss of what to discuss. Not that there isn't a lot to talk about, quite the contrary. Okami has a beautiful painterly aesthetic in the style of Japanese sumie, and the style is emboldened into the plot itself, perfectly melding artistic vision and intent. The combat is unique, utilizing your tail as a paintbrush where you draw out your attacks. The main character is a silent protagonist by virtue of being a wolf, which leads to great comedy where you are a sun god, yet you're a dog. But there's also negatives to the game, no matter how much I love it. The dialogue can be painful, both because of its physical speed and for uncomfortable tropes such as the perverted but lovable doofus. Me thinking the game was over at the halfway point both destroys pacing, and quite honestly, the game's actual ending feels less set up than the midway point. A summary of my review of the game would be this. For a game about bringing life and color back to the world, the transitions are brighter than the end result. I struggle with this as an artist myself. I was taught that you should try to go beyond what you're thinking, exaggerate to extremes to showcase your vision, but I still find myself falling short. I paint with watercolors, and even as I tell myself to paint more vivid, everything is duller than my imagination. That doesn't mean the result is not worth it, or is even bad, but it could be better. There is no harsher critic than an artist who believes they failed. So, what do you talk about Okami for? The bright brights, or the low lows? What is the legacy of an artist and their work? I think I found my topic. Spoilers in this video cover the entire opening, bosses, the ending, and the character arcs of Susanoo, Waka, and Isun. Visuals may be pulled from the other parts of the game, but they will not be explained or spoiled. I also preemptively apologize for any mispronunciations of characters' names, especially for wrongly placed emphasis that I know can be a pet peeve for some. I have recommended Okami many times before, but I have to with two caveats. The first one is that the opening prologue is long, slow, and unskippable if you want to know the plot. The second caveat I have to mention is Isun. We will get to Isun. The prologue tells of a hamlet named Kamiki, where once a year a maiden would be sacrificed to the 8-headed snake demon Orochi. One day, a white wolf appeared, and the village named it Shiranu, after the phenomenon of untouchable ghost lights appearing in the water. The village people thought Shiranu was allied with Orochi, so the warrior Nagi tried to slay it many times. Eventually, Nagi's true love was slated to be sacrificed, so he went to the moon cave of Orochi, dressed as her to distract the demon, and, with the surprising help of Shiranu, slayed the demon. Sadly, Shiranu was fatally wounded in battle. Nagi picked up the wolf and brought its body back to the village, where they built a shrine with a statue in Shiranu's honor, realizing it was always on their side. Nagi's sword, Tsukuyami, was placed in the moon cave. No more need for violence in an age of peace. 100 years passed since Orochi's defeat, and someone stupidly removed Tsukuyami from its resting place, releasing Orochi once again. Darkness swept the land, covering everything in horrible dark magic, save for one insignificant village. The wood sprite that watches over Kamiki, Sakuya, protected the village as best as she could, and turned to the statue of Shiranu, telling the Great Mother that it was time to wake up once again. We are still not done with the expedition dump of the opening, but that is the majority of the setup for the game. It is crucial information that you could learn from context clues if you do skip it, but that would not be the intended way of experiencing the story. Despite the charming way of making the painted cutscene in the style of Japanese scroll, the text goes at a snail's pace, with the same sound bites playing repeatedly, with the only option given to skip the entire opening cutscene. A simple fix would be the ability to have faster text, or even an in-game text log in case you miss something, but that is a flaw that you simply have to get past to start the game. For whatever reason, Amaterasu was the statue and was Shiranu, but most crucially, she was very much a dog, as she lays down, bored of the conversation. This is what makes Amy an amazing protagonist. Not only do we have a female protagonist that doesn't follow any of the usual tropes for main characters, but it's a great way of showing a character who is both alien and familiar. Amy is a god, the sun god, the mother to all, and those who can see her true form revere her as such, but then she'll chase her tail, love scratches, and drift away from conversation. She is a silent protagonist with all the personality in the world, very similar to Link in Breath of the Wild. You feel as if you're playing something greater than you are, but due to her losing her abilities as she slept, you know that she could be so much more. Here's where we introduced caveat number 2, as an insect jumps out of Sakyo's cleavage. The bug introduces himself as Zusun, a wandering artist, and he shouts of his greatness that he will one day have. All will bow before his art. Isun is a loudmouth, arrogant bug who makes constant creepy comments towards women. And he is your companion for the entire game. Amy may be silent, so Isun makes up for that in spades. I will be showcasing the highlights and the bright spots of Isun's character in the game, but you have to accept and deal with the uncomfortable jokes he brings, not to mention his Navi-isms. This game came out a decade after Ocarina of Time, but the equivalent, hey, listen, is not much better. Sakyo's power has run out, and she tasks you with cutting down the fruits in her trees to release the protected village people's spirits. We don't have any weapon to cut down the fruit, however, so we must go into some sacred realm to recover the first of our abilities. Sleeping for a century left us without our powerful brush techniques that allowed us to defeat Orochi in the first place. Finally, control is given to the player, ignoring the interrupted Navi-like explanations of controls, that is. In motion, we can see that everything in the game is silhouetted in black brush strokes, giving the image that the world popped out of a coloring book. Moving around, flowers and grass grow at the footsteps of the goddess, and fiery brands glow bright on her back. Her tail is a gradient from white to black, our own celestial brush. On our back is a reflector, which is the second form of attacking besides biting. The controls, in my opinion, are reactive, but they make Amy feel stiff at times, as she changes speeds in strange ways when jumping or attacking. My biggest pet peeve is the camera, which always tries to rotate upward when I want to focus Amy's center frame, and in tight corners it is hard to see things at times. We arrive at a destroyed bridge, and the camera is pulled back to showcase our main mechanic of the game, brush techniques. Switching from a third-person camera to an omniscient artist looking down on a drawing, with different techniques we physically draw what we want to happen in the world. Here, Isun fixed the bridge by filling in the space with rejuvenation, the first of 13 techniques granted by the 13 gods we will encounter. Meeting Yomigami, we are given the technique ourselves. Soon after, we arrive to the hidden shrine in the cave of Nagi, and receive the second technique of Power Slash, the ability to cut by drawing a straight line. Isun finally realizes just who we are, sharing that when Shiranu died, all of its power became the 13 brush gods that we now have to rejoin with us. He also decides he's sticking with us to defeat Orochi due to the want of learning the other techniques himself. Our first combat interaction is right after. We can run into enemies naturally in the overworld, go through the gates holding demons, or be sneak attacked, after which we will be put in arena until everyone is dead. We are scored on how fast we finish the encounter and how little damage we take, with money being our reward. The enemies we fight are variations of yokai from Japanese folklore, and upon fighting them, we can go look in our scroll for a nice drawing of everything we faced. Combat in this game is fun and varied, and you can attack with either your brush, your teeth, or the mirror on your back. Later in the game, you will change up your weapons to have slightly different attack patterns, like a sword that hits slow yet heavy instead of a mirror that swings fast and light, or rosaries that shoot out in a blast. Later enemies will require brush techniques to break down weaknesses, but it'll all eventually become second nature. Leaving the Sacred Realm, we can slash down the fruit and see the game's most iconic set piece, revealing the dull landscape of Nippon back to color. Bright green magic washes over the land, with flowers covering to rejuvenate everything. Water that was now gray turns bright, crystal blue, and the sky, a dark storm, is now clear as day. The first time I saw this, I was in awe and felt the love of nature that this game so clearly wants to impart on me. But after the transition, I was struck with the feeling that the land was still dull at the end of the day. The bright green of the magic is what I think the color of the grass should have been, because as it stands, the greater difference now is that the sky isn't windy. That is what I meant earlier when I said the transitions were brighter than the result. The ideas are all there for the game, but the execution could use some work. That being said, we eventually head out of town after meeting a chorus of characters and finding out that the mortals see Amy as a plain white wolf, which explains why she was named Shiranu in the past. They simply couldn't see that she was a god. Another mechanic of Okami is the idea that faith and belief in the gods grant them their power. You can do side quests or kind deeds for the people of Nippon in praise, Okami's version of EXP. In the Futurama episode, Godfellas, the robot Bender is floating through space when a colony of tiny people start to grow on his body. He speedruns being a god by trying to grant prayers directly, but either messes up and kills everyone or causes a holy war as some disagree on what his existence means or wants. Eventually, the colony kills itself in mutually assured destruction, and Bender floats more before encountering a being that could be conceived as a god. Bender states that he wasn't very good one when he tried, and asks how this god does it. Being god isn't easy. If you do too much, people get dependent on you, and if you do nothing, they lose hope. You have to use a light touch, like a safecracker or a pickpocket. When you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. That is the response, to which Bender takes as God saying he doesn't try to help out all anymore, or that he at least ignores most issues. When Bender is sent back to Earth, from the B-plot of the episode, Fry comments that the monks they locked in a room without food would probably be okay, and that their god would help them out. Bender loudly proclaims that they have to help them because God won't do jack, something he would have only done because God said the right thing to him in that moment. All of this to say, Amy receives praise not by being obvious with her actions, as the people don't believe it was the wolf right in front of them, but by the release of joy the people feel. For example, you can bring the sun closer to dry a woman's clothing, which gives you praise, but she attributes her good luck to the heavens, and not to the direct correlation of the sun being controlled by the wolf next to her. Amy is making the land of Nippon a better place subtly, just as much as she is making a larger difference by defeating the darkness. The people may thank the gods at the end of the day, and that is how they receive praise, but they do not truly know if that's where their good fortune came from. The knowledge of how and who is making the world a better place is obscured, but does that matter? Are influence, inspiration, and legacy just as important if the source is unknown? Leaving the village, the world is our oyster as a classic adventure unfolds. Now the rest of the video will be focused on the major characters and their thematic relevance rather than the plot. This is not a plot summary like my Slay the Princess video, as Okami is an epic with many minor parts that are not important to call out for an analysis. In fact, I will only be touching on the story when it is needed for individual character analysis, which was stated in the previous spoiler warning. All that is needed to understand the plot for this analysis is the expedition at the beginning, and the general quest of finding the 13 brush techniques to defeat Orochi and the other demons flooding the world. What you need to keep in mind for the story's themes and today's analysis is each major player from 100 years ago has a counterpart in the modern day, many of which are direct descendants or the original reborn. Shiranu is Amaterasu, of course. Nagi is his grandson Susanoo. Nagi's love is a sake brewer named Kushi. Orochi is simply Orochi, and Isun will be explained later. The same beats in history are repeated, with Susanoo's being a hot-headed warrior who is in love with Kushi, but this time he is weighed down by his ancestors' fame. Amaterasu and Orochi are repeating a battle they've long since fought, but they're now in a world that was framed by their previous battle. Amy and Susanoo can't go anywhere without being reminded of the past and how it must define their future. They are recognized as descendants, with both doubt and faith placed in their laps. Amaterasu is lawful good in presence, but in personal drive she is true neutral. She does not have an open desire or any wants that we can tell of, as she is directed by everyone around her on what to do, and she follows suit. Despite her obvious personality, not having any insight into her mind means that she could be doing this quest for any old reason. Most likely she is saving Nippon because she is the great mother Amaterasu, but it could be simply because enough people pray to her and that is the way of the world. She acts like a dog, but how much of that is an act? Everyone holds her with such reverence, but she treats the world like a playground. Though, there are moments when Amy gets serious. If anyone is endangered, she grits her teeth. If she is insulted, she growls, and she looks concerned when Isun is hurt or threatened. It's clear that she understands what is going on around her, but she treats her destiny as a moving path that she was always on. We never see Amy buckle under the weight of her past. She moves with the wind, and with freedom at her feet as new life constantly grows around her. There is no hesitance, as there is only inertia for her. She is what influences the world, it does not influence her. In terms of legacy, she is the ground zero, a fresh canvas. Everything we see is of her doing, or as the other spirits call her, she is the great mother to us all. The 13 brush gods are the most direct form of legacy one could be, as they come directly from the might of Shiranu and become powerful in their own right. Despite only being around for 100 years, their fame has spread enough that Isun has heard of them and wanted to learn their techniques. From Shiranu to Isun, to whoever Isun later inspires with his own work, this is the path of legacy and the lasting form of art. Side note, the wiki states that the gods were simply possessed by Amaterasu, but the game says that they split from one deity and they call her mother, so I'm still believing they came from her, but I'm just not sure if they've only been around for 100 years. It is interesting to note that for all the good Amy does, however, she does not get direct credit and does not immediately reap the rewards. As mentioned before, you received praise for your actions as the people thank the nebulous concept of a god, but they do not thank you. The 13 brush gods are from your own creation, but it isn't Amy who Isun has idolized from the beginning. Throughout the story, many of our actions are credited to Susanoo, who happened to be in the same place, so people correlate the results to him. All of this could be explained away by the fact that regular mortals cannot see Amy for the god she is, but it is also an apt metaphor for the creators of genres and unknown origins. Art movements can be defined as a period of time where enough art connected to each other symbolically or with the same methodology. But most people forget that the major historical art movements were not formed by chance. They are created by collectives, specific people, and organizations in order to push their ideas into the larger art world. The Impressionist movement was defined by specific exhibits that were meant to go against the larger rules of the French salon. The Dada movement was rebelling against traditional creation methods as well as being anti-war. The arts and crafts movement was started by William Morris to bring more attention back to the handmade and away from the mass-produced. It's easy for the origins of these movements to become lost once the peak years have passed, when eventually the standout paintings simply meld into the public consciousness that we forget that there was a time they weren't there at all. This is what best describes Amaterasu's touch in Okami. She is the origin of all, with only those educated in the subject knowing that. Her actions are confused within others, but regardless of who is praised, the inspiration moves on. Look around your room. Pick an object, any object. Do you know where you got it? Do you know who made it? Do you know the historical origins? You may not, but it's still in your room, isn't it? The ghost of the creator, immortal in obscurity. I sometimes stare at things and wonder their origin. Who designed a random button I found on the floor? Who packaged it at the factory? And did they ever think I would be thinking of them? I have a record player that was built in 2014 that has no identifying labels for me to source, but the original phonograph was credited to Thomas Edison. There's a painting on the wall made by my partner at a bad art night. I was there with him, and the tools were given to us by the library who probably bought them from a Walmart, who received them from a distribution center that sourced individual factories. But who made the canvas? Who picked the cotton? Who learned which pigments made what colors? Who was the first human to paint and share that with others? Who puts the sun up at the end of the day? Whether the explanation you give is science or God, it does not matter for you to know for the sun to rise the next day, and the next, and the next. Amaterasu is the origin of all, but origins are easily forgotten in name only, as without the base, the structure would not be there in the future. Amy's legacy is in every blade of grass in the pond. She is just the only one who gets to experience the results of her garden. Susano is a lazy, arrogant, insecure, cowardly bum. The first time you meet him, he is passed out hidden in his basement and refuses to help unblock the path out of Kamiki without sake. Throughout the first half of the game, he is constantly running away, trying to find somewhere that no one else would find him, and he gets mad when we're following him. Yet he shouts that he's the great warrior Susano, and that he's just as amazing as his grandfather. Susano had lived under the shadow of Nagi his entire life. Growing up, he heard stories of his triumphs, and considering he learned the ways of the blade, he clearly felt some latent bravery from them. But when you're just okay at what you do, and your grandfather was the best, you start to grow resentful. It is revealed that it was Susano who took Tsukuyami from its resting place, inadvertently releasing Orochi, because his internal spite built up past what he could handle, and he lashed out however he could, wanting to prove to everyone that the stories were fairy tales. When he fled back to Kamiki, he placed the rock to block the path out, and when the path was cleared, he continued to run. He wanted to be something great, but being faced with a task meant having to do the task, which is easier said in stories than done. Susano is what happens when a legacy is honorable yet crippling. As a little kid, you're proud of your family's history. As a teenager, you want to emulate it. And as an adult, you realize the reality of doing such a thing. Not to mention, he would not even be the first to defeat Orochi. Who cares if it's such a great feat of strength and heroism if someone already did it before? And on top of that, Orochi's only freed because of Susano's actions. And on top of that, Amy is doing most of the work at the end of the day. It can't have been like that for Nagi, was it? But, as an adult, you realize the reality of doing hard things. The legend of Nagi dressing up as his love to get the jump on Orochi? That's not true at all. Due to time travel shenanigans, what really happened was we, as Amy, knocked him out, dressed him up, and dragged him to the cave to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Nagi was just as cowardly as his descendant, as even if he wanted to do something, he was scared beyond belief. It is only when in the cave, fighting, that the courage comes to him, and with the help of Amaterasu from the future and Surano of the past, Orochi is sealed for the first time. Nagi and Susano are the exact same to a T. It is a common trope in time travel media that ancestors and descendants look and act alike, as it saves actors and models, to show that they aren't so different even separated across time. But here it is used to humanize Nagi and Susano. Nagi is not a man of legends, he's a man, with all the flaws that come with the title. Time may sand down the edges of him as a person, the origin forgotten, but the image created is what was remembered and directly inspires the next generation. Susano is not a man of legends. He is a man who will one day be a legend. He does not gallantly sacrifice himself for the love of Kushi. He got halfway and hid behind a rock. But unlike his ancestor, he did not need to be dragged into battle, as he gathered enough courage to at least attempt joining himself. He may be overestimating his capability as he boasts, but that doesn't change his intent and his actions being true. As a later character we will discuss says, life is all about resolve, outcome is secondary. He arguably was braver than Nagi because of this, balancing out his flaws of being insecure more than a coward. Eventually these flaws will be forgotten as well, and maybe his descendants will feel an even heavier weight. It is the victors who write the history books, and after all, doesn't it make for a better story to focus on the honor over the mistakes? I am being told, aka I read the plot summary of Okami real quick, that there's another time travel shenanigan plot point that meant Susanoo was pushed into battle by Chibutarasu, but the point still stands that he at least got to the shrine by himself. He fought when push came to shove. There's a fine line between legacy and a burden. Everyone wants to be the first to succeed, no one wants to be the first to fail, and being the second only grants you one of those options. It is best to realize where you are in the world and do your best, for yourself and not the ideas you or others have placed on you. Susanoo returns to Kamiki, a hero who saved the girl. Fireworks go off in celebration, heralding another era of peace. And that is the first half of the game complete. Urachi's death released many more demons. Susanoo's story may be over, but yours is not. This is the part where I fully thought I completed the game and closed it until returning years later. The first half of Okami is strong enough to be its own standalone game, and it may have been better if it was, with the second half being a sequel, DLC, or a new Game Plus edition. Perhaps it is because I played the first half more, but it is more memorable to me than the second half, with a straightforward story where everything combines on itself, a perfect beginning, middle, and end. By contrast, the second half introduces more bosses that are less interconnected, tribes and characters that are simply there and don't have a greater reason for being involved with the plot, and a final big bad named Yami that feels less important than Urachi despite being a greater threat. The setup for the second half is 2 screens of dialogue that essentially go, oops, all demons, when Urachi had a full 20-minute prologue explaining him as a threat. That being said, the second half is still an enjoyable story and game, with some of my favorite moments that retroactively make the first half more interesting, with the time traveling to defeat Urachi in the past being in that part. But the format is strange. Waka is without a doubt the weirdest guy in the game. Have you ever played a D&D campaign where the DM has a strange NPC show up, be cryptic, is somehow connected to everything happening, and leaves? That's Waka. He is the epitome of this meme. And I love him. To start off with, I am in love with his design, as he is in a traditional Japanese attire with the tallest gaita ever. He has bright blonde hair that is hidden beneath a bird helmet with a veil that resembles bird wings. As he moves around, it gives the impression that he can fly, and is otherworldly, as he balances on trees and on the surface of water. His flute that heralds his interests can turn into a sword, which he does not need as he has a second one at his side. Don't ask me why, but his first sword is named Pillow Talk, and I don't understand why. According to the fandom wiki, it translates to Makara Kotoba, which is a Japanese poetry term meaning pillow words, in that a phrase acts as a pillow to augment another phrase. None of which means what the English phrase pillow talk means, so I have to assume it's a joke from the translators. The other confusing aspect of Waka is, he's French? This is another translation decision, as in the original Japanese, he used English expressions. So I guess making him say French expressions combined with naming his sword Pillow Talk gave him more of the cool guy, flirty aesthetic they were going for. His personality is cavalier and playful, as his sword's name would suggest, but he also knows a lot more than he shares. The first time you meet him, he fights Amy to see how strong she is, and then states his disappointment in her abilities after her years of rest. He explains that he was the guardian of the Moon Cave, and he was momentarily gone when a man, who we knew to be Susanoo, released Urachi. He then gives you his first prophecy as he claims to be a prophet. I foresee a log and big thrills. That is the setup for most of your interactions with him. He appears, fights you, claims you're still too weak, gives a prophecy that vaguely foreshadows something that will happen in the near future, and it's French. It becomes clear as you progress that his attitude is partially a coping mechanism, as he has a lot on his shoulders, and he respects you greatly, simply wanting to make sure you are at your true power to defeat Urachi. The game wants you to think he's on the side of evil, but he just acts like that. Waka has his hand in many pies. He is one of the 3 survivors of the Moon Tribe, a group that lived, as the name suggests, on the moon, but was wiped out. He oversees the Tau Troopers, a group meant to protect Queen Himiko, which unfortunately is unsuccessful in its task. He tried his best to guide and protect Amaterasu, but always ends up facing 2 large threats for him to handle. Waka is a failure in almost everything he does, but it is not from lack of trying. We do not see the Moon Tribe. They have long since perished before the game, and Okami the only members we meet are Waka and a woman who was sent to Earth when she was a baby, Alice Superman. Waka was a grown adult, however, and had to experience that loss. After, he took a ship named the Ark of Yamato to the Celestial Plane, which is where he grew quite close with Amaterasu. One day, Urachi and his demons attacked, and Waka prophesied that only a chosen one would be able to defeat him, so Amy sent her and the demon down to Earth, waiting for Nagi to be born and ready to fight. Waka guided the people of the plane, the Celestials, into the Ark to save them from the rest of the demons. Sadly, once on the Ark, even more powerful demons revealed themselves, killing everyone on board except for Waka. Crashing into Earth and releasing the demons, Waka then set forth to guide Amaterasu and help Nippon the best he could over the next 200 years. Despite any help, Amy as Shiranu still fell in her battle with Orochi. So in conclusion, literally everyone Waka set out to protect died. This could look suspicious, and certainly when you meet him and all you know is he keeps attacking you, you don't trust him. But, like his prophecies, you sadly only realize in hindsight just how useful and on your side he is. And his tragic backstory mixed with his nonchalant personality makes him an interesting character, although a bit silly. Waka is a good parallel to Amy in that all he does is for the sake of Nippon in his various homes over the years. Perhaps due to his relationship with Amaterasu in the Celestial Plane, he learned how to be playful and experience joy even during hardships. Amy loves fighting, so why wouldn't Waka challenge her whenever they met? Who at first seems an annoying nuisance is actually your most dedicated follower. It is mentioned that only those who have accepted their fate can board the Ark of Yamato, which is why Amy and Waka can walk on freely at the end of the game, both knowing who they are and what they must do. Waka tried fighting with you against the final boss Yami on the Ark, and when you return to the Celestial Plane, it is with him and no one else you met on your travels. Waka is who states life is all about resolve, outcome is secondary, and he lives with that in his heart, never regretting, only moving forward with bravery. In terms of legacy, Waka is not an artist. Despite his many interactions with Nippon, he does not leave much of a lasting impression. He has such a big personality, but has resigned himself to be forever under his god. He is immortal, or at least long-lived, so he does not have to create a legacy. He simply goes by day in his tasks. Waka is not one for legacy of the arts, but he does have a muse in Amaterasu. An artist gives off inspiration, and another receives it. The artists, in turn, had their own muse that formulated their work, and on until time began and will end. Even when Amaterasu slept for 100 years, Waka was still working for her, in her name, due to his loyalty. I would consider Waka here to be the result of having a muse over being inspired by the legacy, as he knows where Amaterasu is, and treated her as if she were away on holidays. He was never apart from her, in spirit or physically, so how could his actions be driven from any internal self-decision-making? Waka goes beyond being inspired. Inspiration creates differences as it spreads. It is an augmenter of thoughts. Having a muse, however, is attempting to replicate, and becomes a part of the source's legacy, since the results are a copy of their greatness. What is that to say about Amaterasu's legacy, then? She is the muse for a man who failed in every task, but no matter the hardships, he stayed by her side. Perhaps Amy's legacy was too great to stand next to, being a god, and even attempting the climb was a great achievement. Perhaps receiving such loyalty showcases how great she is for earning it. Perhaps this is a moment in history where the painter is forgotten, but the portrait is immortalized. In museums, there are many works attributed to unknown artists, or even unknown subjects. Like with the history of art movements, if the artist was not famous enough, it is easy to lose the source, but they still hang next to the greats all the same. The world of Okami is a portrait of Amaterasu, the god and the idea, but not Amy, nor her loyal companions. They are an unknown artist, unknown subject, unknown providence. But like Amy, Waka does not care for ensuring legacy and proper credit. He does it for her. For however long he lives, he will never be away from his muse. But what happens when you do lose a muse? When they're gone, beyond what you can see, can you stand without the crutch of seeing something great right before your eyes? When does replication end and creation begin? How do you go from being inspired to inspiring? Isude is introduced, as you recall, as a wandering artist, and his task is to learn all 13 brush techniques to better his craft. We see his work periodically throughout the game, and he's good. Despite boasting like Susano in his talents, he seems to have the skills to back it up. But even with all that, he still lies and is insecure. The painting of Sakuya he shows at the beginning is actually his grandfather Ishiku's that he stole and presented as his own. Issun has his own family legacy that he must live up to, just like Susano, and he somehow ran away from it more than the Great Warrior. In the second half of the game, we go to Paktan, home of the Ponkles, which is Issun's race. We meet Ishiku, who recognizes Amy as his former companion, and we are introduced to the idea of celestial envoys. The Ponkles, it turns out, pride themselves on their artistic abilities, and occasionally, when faith is low in Nippon, they send out an envoy whose job it is to spread art and tales of the god's greatness. Essentially, they're the god's PR department. Not saying what is true, but whatever inspires the most praise. Ishiku was the sixth celestial envoy who traveled with Shiranu 100 years prior, being Issun's past parallel, and he is the one who wrote all the travel guides that you pick up during your adventure. When you time travel into the past, you can even see him with Shiranu. Issun has a contentious relationship with his grandfather. Susanoo lives solely with the idea of Nagi's greatness. Issun had it in his face every day, especially since Ishiku was his teacher and expected him to become the 7th celestial envoy. Envoys 1 through 5, as far as we know, did not travel with the gods, simply speaking for them, so Ishiku went above and beyond his task of helping Amaterasu directly. This is why Issun ran away from Puctan, all the way to Kamiki. He did not like how strict his grandfather's teachings were, and he was afraid of the legacy being pushed on him. He still wanted to be a great artist, but he wasn't sure he could live up to the expectations that had been so clearly set up for him. It didn't help that Ishiku was a tough-love kind of teacher, inadvertently diminishing Issun's want to be an envoy by never giving him praise, since in Ishiku's mind, the praise would be for the gods instead. Issun is what happens when you give both too much attention and too little attention to a developing child. Despite all of that, Issun follows exactly in his grandfather's footsteps, as he becomes Amaterasu's companion and continues to practice his craft. He shouts Amy's praises to anyone that would hear him, but the problem was that the envoy was not meant to shout. They were meant to tell, to draw, to create. Issun only created for himself, and he was tying Amy's greatness to his own. Like Waka, he was a loyal companion, but without the selflessness of the prophet. That was the main teaching Ishiku failed at imparting on his grandson, humility. As Amy is approaching the Ark, Issun tries to say goodbye to the Smeda of the goddess. Waka then appears and tells that only those who accept their fate can enter the Ark at all. Issun learned the brush techniques. He supported Amy directly, but he was still running away from being an envoy, from accepting being a promoter instead of the focus. Issun cannot enter, and because of his cowardice, he cannot help Amy in her most important battle, at least in the way he's been doing so far. The fight against the demon Yami does not go well. Amy has been battered by a boss rush and got the literal brush techniques beat out of her. Waka was thrown off out of the battle, and all seemed lost. Lost, that is, until you hear all the words of all those you met and helped throughout your journey. They are all cheering for you, like in the end of Thousand Year Door, which is an equally long mid-fight cutscene, but at least this one has a skip button on replays. And they're all reading something. We see Issun jumping across all of Nippon, tossing papers left and right to anyone that hears or sees him. It is his best piece yet, Issun's interpretation of the great god Amaterasu in all her glory. He tells her story, embellishing when needed, stylizing her life and accomplishments. He is being the 7th celestial envoy. He finally accepted that his legacy is in continuing Amy's, continuing his grandfather's, but he is not letting go of his own wants fully. Everyone knows it was the great wandering artist Issun's work, and it was his brushstrokes that made everyone believe in the White Wolf that they had befriended along the way. It is too late for Issun to join Amy on the Ark, and he may never see her again, but he is working through memory, and an artist's mind is the greatest and truest camera. The envoys do not replicate. Their works are not still lives. They are imagined what-ifs and exaggerated tales. Issun may not be praised himself as much as he wanted, but he is still receiving praise in a different way. His works are from his own imaginations, his own creative interpretation of his muse. If the envoys required seeing the gods to make their work, then they would not be as useful. We see that the people of Nippon believe more in the ephemeral than the literal next to them, as it is easier to believe in good fortune than the gods directly living next to you. So if the envoys give literal depictions, that belief would be much weaker than a more easily digestible manner. They have to use their talents as an artist, painter, poet to share properly with others their intended meaning. An artist must feel more than they share, or else they share less. When artists are known, their names are engraved proudly on plaques hanging next to great works, but they are not the first thing you notice. You see the grand oil paintings, the masterful carvings, the subject of the pieces. There will be less eyes, especially as time goes on the name of the artist over their creation, but eyes will wander, and it will always be there. You may have seen the painting, The Wedding at Cana, a massive piece the size of a wall. It was most famously across the room for the longest time from the Mona Lisa, a painting whose fame may be matched by its creator, Leonardo da Vinci. I have seen people ask why something this massive is in the same room as something so small, but people still don't seem to notice it. Many have seen this painting, have been in the same room. Fewer know its name, but I would assume that very little know the artist's name. I was aware of this painting because of the discourse that pops up here and now again of the fame of the Mona Lisa, but it wasn't until writing this did I learn the artist's name. Paolo Veronese. The point I am making is that this is easily learned information about an in-your-face painting, but that is not the focus of a viewer. Until an artist's fame rises past their works, then a majority of the audience's focus will be solely on the work. Issun wanted attention, but even if he wasn't an envoy, he would experience the same disconnected viewers. Did he want to be a great artist, or did he want to be known as a great artist? In the end, he finds the middle ground, receiving his long-wanted appreciation while coming to the inner peace of his destiny. He will have his own legacy, unlike Waka, because he makes something different than what already exists, but it will be a humble one. Asune is a mid-ground of having a muse and having inspiration, as he learns the difference. If he did not realize what he needed to do, if he could only draw from a direct muse, then he would not be able to inspire on his own right. For a short detour before the conclusion of this essay, I would like to explore Okami's art style and how it connects to its themes. Sumi-e is a Japanese art form utilizing ink and quick brushstrokes meant to represent the soul of what is being depicted. This is clearly the art style that Okami uses for its visuals, with its thick outlines and almost cartoonish stylization of the environment. Originally, Okami was going to be more realistic, with the original design being a New Game Plus unlockable skin for Amy, but they switched to the Sumi-e style due to graphical limitations. I think its current style made Okami stand out and is more timeless than a realistic one, but it also works thematically with the game. Of course, most obviously, the paintbrushes used in Sumi-e is perfectly reflected in Amy's tail. Whenever we use our brush in game, we can see the ink pot and our actual strokes are simple, quick movements, usually just straight lines or circles. Sumi-e is depicting something in space form with no frills attached, much like our sun technique being a plain circle or our rejuvenation technique being covering what is missing without detail. Sumi-e appreciates the act of drawing and is not meant to be realistic with fixes after completion. You are meant to capture the essence of your subject with as little as needed, becoming just as expressive as concept art can be. In art, there is a difference between an icon and a symbol. An icon is a depiction that is meant to represent the thing it is, and it is easily recognizable as that thing to even someone unfamiliar with the specific icon. An example of an icon is a cartoon flower, or even a more realistic flower. A symbol is an image that is meant to represent a concept, and you understand it as such through learning about connections in the social world. An example of a symbol is a stop sign, the save icon on computers being a floppy disk, or any logo. The Apple logo may be an icon of an apple, but it is a symbol since your recognition of it is more connected to the idea of a computer company than the fruit. Sumi-e works with icons. Even though it is simplistic, what you see is what it represents. A circle in the sky is the sun because you see it as the sun, not anything else. The black ovals are leaves because you connect them being on a line as being a tree with branches. The soul of the object is in the piece due to the talent of the artist and the knowledge of the viewer. In Okami, the brush techniques are a translation of this art form, and I can't imagine the game have any different aesthetic, as Sumi-e is perfect. It is also the perfect art form for Asune's story, as it is one that looks deceptively simple, but requires focus and training to perfect. Sumi-e can be a form of storytelling, and a dishonest artist will make a dishonest piece. That is why, at the end of the game, Asune's final piece is so meaningful and is able to save the day. It is him coming to terms with his grandfather's teachings, and the art made itself, as he let the brush guide him. As one source put it, the piece is created from nothing, not just copied. Asune must take inspiration and not chain himself to his muse. Sumi-e not allowing corrections now brings us to the final review of the game. Did you know that the original box art for Okami on the Wii includes the IGN logo? Because someone took the promotional art used for an IGN article and didn't realize it was there. That is a perfect summary of Okami. Brilliantly stylistic, something you want to look at, but not too closely or you start to see errors that should have been fixed. From small quality of life issues to problems with pacing to character decisions, the flaws of Okami are small but sprinkled in wherever you look. You can easily ignore most of them, but that still drags the game down as a whole. This is sadly partially due to Capcom's treatment of Clover Studio, and the Wii port suffered due to the loss of assets that had to be recreated. These issues could have been addressed, but they did the best with what they could with the lot that they drew. Regardless of that fact, however, I love this game inside and out. The story arcs of the characters are rich and understandable, the style and design choices are unique while propping up a gorgeous history of art, and at the end of the day, it is simply fun. I critique this game because I can see how it could have been so much better, but without those improvements, I am still here. This is not one of those games where the flaws add charm, but it adds humanity. In a game about art and pressure, the mistakes feel like ones the characters make, realistic oversights that sometimes we're too blind to see, and errors that we wish we could change but must live with. Like in Sumi-e, the mistakes could not be fixed without more errors popping up, and the game was made with confident brushstrokes even in error. In continuing its own legacy, the sequel Okami Den follows the sons of Susano and Amaterasu, potentially furthering the pressures that were showcased in Okami, but it may not be canon now. The sequel announced at the Game Awards has limitless potential for what it can do, and we have no way of knowing at this moment when or where it will even take place. That means the current legacy of Okami is in its successors and those of the audience it touched. Amaterasu has appeared in other media since her games, most notably being DLC for Monster Hunter. Merch still comes out occasionally, so both things, plus the sequel announcement, clearly indicates that there is a loyal fanbase. Clover Studios didn't make any games after Okami and was shut down by Capcom soon after the original release, so it is bittersweet that their characters still exist in crossovers, sequels, and re-releases. But importantly for the studio itself, you will never forget who made Okami. Their own signature is scattered throughout the entire game, as you can dig holes to reveal and revitalize dying four-leaf clovers, their legacy literally living on whenever anyone plays their game. Now, the studio set to make the sequel is named Clovers, an independent studio under Hideki Kamiya, a legacy living on. That is my review and analysis for Okami in and of itself, but now I will explain the importance of its themes in the wider world. I mentioned at the beginning of this essay that I am an artist. For information on my background, I have a bachelor's in fashion design and I have dabbled in writing, poetry, painting, and sculpting. In art school, you are expected to write an artist statement. It could be anything, a poem, a list, a declaration. Whatever form your statement takes, it is simply required that it encompasses what you are as an artist, what you believe and what you make, and why you do it. I don't have a concrete artist statement, I must admit, as I was asked to make probably around 7 in my 4 years of college, but thinking of them that much did the intended goal of making sure I knew where I stood with my art and with art as a whole. My personal definition of art is that one must fulfill one of these 3 requirements to be considered art. It must have time, intent, or meaning. For example, there is an art piece that is a rubbing of an artist's apartment, and then reconstructed later. This took time. In the beginner poetry class I took, one of the answers to the question, what makes a poem, was decided to be the intent to make something artistic or poetic made it so, which is how any epic of old, a haiku, or a contemporary Instagram poem are all in the same category. Duchamp's Fountain, as much as I have personal beef with this piece and hate it to my core, is a urinal signed by an artist and submitted into galleries with a meaning applied to it, the meaning being, what is art really? It may be silly to define what art is, to seemingly box yourself in with artistic statements, but the way I view it at the end of the day, anything really can be art if you view it as such. That thought process makes the box much bigger. But that comes with the question of legacy. If anything is art, who is remembered over the rest? Who creates the ripples that spread far and wide? I have been in the position of Isun, and I still am. I've since graduated and have no luck finding a job. My art isn't noticed by more than a few people I know, with that circle feeling smaller every day, and I have no idea what I'm going to do tomorrow. It seems too late to go the easy route that was set up for me, but I don't even have a destiny in the way Isun did to finally accept. One of the more known symbolisms in art is memento mori, which is Latin for remember that you will die. In art, this means depictions of skeletons, skulls specifically, and other forms of death are placed intentionally to make the viewer question their own mortality, questioning what they're doing with their lives. In Hans Holbein's The Ambassadors, there is a skull painted at an angle so that it can only be seen at a specific point, representing the leering of death. Memento mori is another form of legacy, as it can be utilized by an artist to ask themselves, what am I doing? What is my legacy? Elegies and requiems are both terms for songs and poems of mourning, a reflection on a life lived, and what remains now that they are gone. In the poem Crossing the Bar by Alfred Lord Tennyson, the poet writes of his death as a ship passing through to the other side with the request that no one mourns him. The poem does not deal directly with the idea of legacy, rather the opposite, but Tennyson, before his death, requested that whatever his work is published, this poem should be included. He considers this his legacy, an example of his work that he wanted to be remembered by. A few musicians would put this poem to song, with my favorite being the Longest John's cover, allowing Tennyson's work to extend even further after his death. In Okami, there are victims to the reign of Urachi and Yami, with many people dying. Queen Himiko, the Moon Tribe, the Celestials, even Amaterasu's old self. They are faced with the idea of fading away, moving on and letting the living deal with the mess left behind. But they don't. Queen Himiko speaks to you from beyond the dead. The Moon Tribe lives in Waka's bravery. The celestial spirits guide you to the Ark, and Amaterasu's sun rose again. Susano and Isun stood up for the challenge because they had a guide map letting them know that success was not only possible, but something they could achieve themselves. They all survived long enough to pass on, to inspire the next generation, and help out the old. The connection of all we experience is a living web of interactions, hands that never let go and draw us to conclusions with or without us noticing. Those without a muse make a decision that will one day make themselves a muse for another, and then further yet an inspiration when they're gone. My favorite poet is Upson Dobson, a relatively unknown British writer whose greatest claim to fame is being quoted by Oscar Wilde in Picture of Dorian Gray. But my copy didn't so much as cite him when he was quoted, and I had to search him out with only a snippet of his work. My favorite piece of his is entitled On the Future of Poetry, where he muses on just that. With prophetic language, he discusses his hope for the future of the art form. Bards of the future, you that come, with striding march and roll of drum, What will your newest challenge be to our prose-bound community? What magic will you find to stir the limp and languid listener? For this beyond all doubt is plain, that truth that pleased will please again, and move men as in bygone years, when Hector's wife smiled through her tears. Ironically, in his poem, Fame is a Food That Dead Men Eat, he discusses the desire of self-insurance, personal connections, and critical acclaim over being well-known. In it, he states that he has no such stomach for such meat, echoing his loss to time. Did you know one of the only places you can find Dobson's poetry is on allpoetry.com, a site that has since started including AI analysis and summary of every poem on their website? Consider me lost in the world, scared of my future, reading a poem on the future of art and seeing an algorithm telling me how to feel. My favorite artist, who solely wrote of the joys of creation, was being covered with generated ideas. It angered me so much that my next fashion piece was changed to be a rebellion against the growing use of AI in the arts, and my work, Bard of the Future, was allowed to be presented at the International Textile and Apparel Association for my skills and my writing on the piece. This is the legacy of art. Because I was assigned to read a romantics novel, because I noticed an uncredited quote, because I found the source, because I looked for more, because I remembered that work years later, because someone thought it meant so little that AI was good enough substitution for human thought, because I decided to take that anger and do something with it, because I am here today. The legacy of an artist is never a dead end or straight path. It is a maze of dominoes that influence and change others simply by breathing into life. You most likely did not know of Austin Dobson before today, and you certainly did not know of his influence on my life. And he definitely did not think this is how he'd be remembered. But we don't get to choose our legacy. I'd like to read a piece of a poem I wrote around the time I discovered Dobson's work. O bards of the future, he asked of me, what will you bring? How am I to respond? A poet a century dead, a grave I cannot find, a legacy so forgotten his true name I do not know. I read him by chance in less than the reference of a more famous man's work. O bards of the future, he asked of me, what will you bring? I hope it is something good. I hope I bring something different. That in after a century of me lying dead, someone else will find my poetry. For now, I have proof that a man's words outlives his voice. I hope I am what he imagined the future of poetry could be. I will be leaving a link below to the collections of Dobson's writing, and I encourage you to read them in your own time if you want a new poet. I ask if you don't do that, then do this. Every one of us knows an artist in their life, and we all definitely know one who is struggling, whether emotionally or financially. Share their work with others. Ask them what they've been doing or what their process is. Remind them that they are loved and that they should never stop. Their work will most likely be shared without their name, and the subject more famous than the author, which as we've seen with Issun can be disheartening, so help them out. It is not only the gods who run on praise. The legacy of most artists is small, but the legacy of the world and life itself is in every one of us. Art is in every one of us. Pick up a pen, tell a story. Everything takes time, intent, or meaning, meaning everything is art. So go live, create, and smile. And maybe one day you'll see someone take the torch from you and continue the greatest cycle humans have called inspiration. And that is its own reward that we may be lucky enough to see, just like Amaterasu. Oh boy, that was a fun one to do. Currently, my arm is really tired. I'm hunched over in a corner under a blanket so I can record this. So thank you so much for sticking around to the end. Thank you so much for the kind words given for my first video on Slay the Princess. Because of that, I was able to work on this one. And I have many more ideas lined up for an analysis. But if you have any game recommendations, I am always open to hearing them. I'm also trying my hardest to think of a topic that I can overanalyze Viva Pinata for, but I will get there, I swear. So please subscribe and stick around. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the month if possible, so I can get monetization, so please subscribe. I did mean it when I said share artists you know. Comment anyone you like. In today's climate, we need to be reminded of the best part of ourselves. My current attention, again, it's credits, I don't have to re-record this. My current attention is on the collective of users at r/beta readers, as I have been volunteering my time there and have read so many interesting stories that I hope to get to see the light of day. That being said, I hope y'all are having a great day, and thank you for watching.